I think the Democrats came to Harris somewhat reluctantly. There was a sense, just even 3 or 4 months ago that she was not a particularly strong candidate. I think there's a lot of apprehension. President Biden faltered so badly and so visibly during the debate with Donald Trump in June that there was basically a revolt by both the party leaders and the rank and file. And, just this stark awareness that President Biden's skills had diminished significantly. He probably still can be an effective president, but he cannot be an effective candidate. Particularly for someone against Donald Trump, where he's a very, very difficult person uh, to debate. He does not adhere to most of the norms of professional debate. Adhering to facts and logical flows of arguments. Very, very hard to debate. And Biden showed that he just simply was not able to. And Trump left open a lot of areas of possible response that Biden was not able to jump on. So I think Democrats reluctantly came to the conclusion that Biden couldn't win. And there was a lot of discussion about whether they should have a quote open process and just have like a whole new primary system. But then, Biden waited so long to decide. And then when he decided quickly to endorse Harris, followed by the endorsements of the Clintons, President Clinton and Secretary Clinton, and then all the potential rivals just kind of pulled back and decided not to jump in. So it's an astonishing turn of events. I mean, I've been watching politics for half a century, and I've never seen anything like this in terms of just the fundamental mood of the race. I mean, I think in late June, there was a sense the Democrats thought that they were going to lose the presidency to Donald Trump, who they view as a serious, profound threat to the Republic, and also probably lose the House and the Senate so that there would be no guardrails at all on Trump. And a Supreme Court that effectively has given him immunity from any crime he wants to commit that can be described as official business. So in late June, I think the Democrats were in full panic mode. And, of course, Biden struggled to make his decision. But when he did, some stunning turn of events. It's going to come down to the race in 6 or 7 states and probably tens of thousands of votes that will ultimately determine who wins. I think it actually turns out to be an advantage, surprisingly. I mean, I think, Americans embrace the new thing for a while and then they get tired of it. And Harris is the new thing. And so she's exciting, she's fresh, she's new, even though she's been vice president for 4 years. So I think a short campaign works to her advantage. I think it, is short enough that she has not had to sort of navigate all the fissures and tensions of the Democratic Party. I mean, the party is united in defeating Donald Trump, and they're willing to put all their policy disputes on hold for that goal. And I think had she had to go through the whole primary process, she might have had to navigate the various policy landmines more than she has to now. She can just barrel ahead and say, you know, want to, I want to take America into the future, and I want to defeat Donald Trump. And that's about all she has to say at this point. I think it's died down already. I mean, I think there was really dramatic that occurred right on the eve of the convention. There's always something heroic having, survived an assassination. I think that, it gave him momentum into the Republican convention in Milwaukee. But I think that's already faded. And particularly any sort of narrative that accident changed Donald Trump in a fundamental way has been disproved. I mean, he is the same Donald Trump. So there's no real serious argument that it's a different man who's been transformed by this near-death experience, that he's more reflective and broader minded and more compassionate. I mean, that's been proven not to be true. So I don't think it's going to be a major factor. I think
Do you think there could be another January 6th type incident if Trump loses?
I do. Um, Donald Trump has, one of the dangers of the Trump era, which I don't think enough people have paid attention to, and he's created a whole different dynamic in American politics in which if he loses, it's not a valid election. And for 250 years, we've had a tradition that says you fight hard, sometimes brutally, but when you lose, you acknowledge defeat, you accept the results, and you move on. Donald Trump is the first president in 250 years who shattered that norm. And he did it in 2020, and he's certainly prepared to do it again in 2024. So if he doesn't win, he's not going to. I mean, and I think there would be a humiliation to losing to an African American woman. I think that would be humiliating for him, and so I don't think he would concede. And then it becomes a really interesting and, I mean, frightening prospect about how the electoral votes are counted, how they're certified, how the process goes forward. When the Congress convenes in early January. So, um, a really, really razor thin Trump loss, I think, would usher in a very difficult time for the United States. I think we would have a very, very difficult transition um, of power. I mean, I think Biden would pass on the reins to Harris amicably and graciously, but in terms of the certification processes in Congress, I think could be very complicated. In the Supreme Court, it's uncertain really where they come down. I mean, I hate to be partisan here, but I think the court has shown itself to be partisan, deeply partisan. And so it has a 6-3 Republican majority, and it's unclear what they would decide if the fate of the 2024 election comes down to their rulings. And I don't think they would be in any way constrained by precedent or other factors that you would hope would be a significant force guiding their decisions. So I think, unfortunately, I think we could be through a very, very difficult time. Um, my own hope is that once we get through this election, and if President Harris, if Vice President Harris becomes president, we can move into a new era in politics where the Republican Party becomes a conservative party again, right of center, pushes forward conservative views, defends them, fights over policy, and becomes, fights over economics and budget and taxes, and pulls back from the culture wars that all their main purpose is just to divide us and to teach Americans how different we are from each other. So, and I'm not saying Democrats have not played the game too, but I mean, the Republican parties have become a party of wedge issues, and that's destructive to our country's democracy. So I'm hoping that if Vice President Harris emerges as president, she's going to govern as she can. But then there emerges a really constructive alternative from the Republican Party that fights over policy and that has core views that they defend, rather than trying to be just a party of negativity and anger. I think it's largely down to the main candidates. I mean, I think Harris helped herself with Governor Walz, just in terms of energizing the campaign, providing kind of a fun personality contrast to Harris. And you can see Harris on the campaign trail. I mean, they enjoy each other. He seems to lighten her move and kind of give a bounce to her step. I mean, he's funny, he's joyful, he's relaxed, he's down to earth. He obviously in a how many millions and millions of dollars are talked and are allocated to political communications. And here, Walz, by throwing out the thing, these guys are weird. sort of reframed, the Trump Vance ticket for literally millions of Americans. So I think Walz has been an asset for Harris. Vance, it's hard to read. I mean, he obviously has fortified the Trump base. They like him. Um, it has not expanded the Trump base in any way because he's basically, a younger, more eloquent, if you want to say it that way, or at least a more fluid and fluent version of Trump. So I don't think, Vance really in any way expands Trump's appeal, but intensifies it for some of the, of Trump's base. I would say yes. I mean, there's a couple. I mean, I was a young lad in 1968, and that was a remarkable. You had the president stepping down. Robert Kennedy, the presumed heir, assassinated. Martin Luther King, who was a big political figure and civil rights figure, assassinated. Hubert Humphrey rising and then losing ultimately to Richard Nixon, who may have actually helped undermine Humphrey by sabotaging talks on Vietnam. So, from the gaze of a historian, 1968 was a pretty astonishing election. I was a reporter in Washington covering the 2000 election where, Gore loses the presidency by 400 votes, 437 or 438 in Florida. And that was an astonishing election to watch. Um, I was in Washington in 2008 with the election of Barack Obama and actually covered both of his inaugurals and, sat out in the front steps of the Capitol, look over and see, 1.5 million people behind me. So that was an unforgettable moment. So there's been some really remarkable moments, but this election, depends how it turns out ultimately. But this has been astonishing. And just, the 90-day period or 60-day period really from the Biden-Trump debate, the attempted assassination of Trump, Trump's coronation in Milwaukee, Biden's withdrawal, and then Harris's ascendancy. I mean, no one could have predicted that. I mean, that was a series of events I could never pretend to have foreseen for sure. I mean, I guess it would depend on the circumstances. I mean, if Trump wins, um, quote, fair and square. I mean, if he wins Pennsylvania even by 2,000 votes, and Michigan by 5,000, and Wisconsin by 5,000, and presumably Harris is going to win the popular vote by 4 or 5%, 3 or 4 percentage points. Biden won the popular vote in 2020 by 7 million. I mean, if Harris wins the popular vote by 7 or 8 million and then loses in the Electoral College, I mean, it's going to raise renewed questions about whether this is the best system for electing presidents. Um, but I don't see a constitutional amendment occurring in the near term. So the system is what it is. So I guess what I'm saying is, if I think Trump, if he were to win sort of fair and square, um, I mean, Democrats would be very, very distraught. And then again, also would depend on how he governed. I mean, if he starts out, as he says, I'm just going to be a dictator for one day, and he is a real dictator for a day and day plus, I assume there'll be some kind of resistance movement that could become very very widespread and possibly lead to some confrontations. So I don't know, but I mean, I think that one thing Americans have to hope for is just a clean result, and even if the margin is not huge, the notion of, someone won enough states to get 270 electoral votes. They're the president, and then we just, as we have for 250 years, move on, work with the president when we can, oppose him or her when we must, but we move forward with our democracy. So that's what I'm hoping happens. But it's not clear that it will. I wish I were 100% certain it would, but that's the effect of 2020. It's really the whole notion of a peaceful transfer of power has been challenged for the first time, and it's hard to overstate how profound that moment is in American history. And to have a second election where that same basic element of American democracy, a peaceful transfer of power, a second consecutive election in which that peaceful transfer is denied will be really, really damaging. I don't think I'm not sure people fully appreciate just how fundamental this change is. Well, but I have to say, I was in Chicago for the Democratic Convention. I attended all 4 nights. And the thing that struck me most is just, and I have to say, I watched parts of the Republican convention on TV. I didn't watch the whole thing, so I have to be careful what I say about the Republicans. But I was struck at just how deep the Democratic bench is. I mean, there are a dozen really, really interesting, impressive leaders, governors, um, attorney generals, state attorney generals, representatives, senatorial candidates, Mayor Pete. I mean, I was just struck by how deep the Democratic bench is, and just the sense that the notion of no, talent no longer is entering political life; they're going into other realms, and no one who's any good enters politics. What I saw in Chicago completely belies that. There's some amazing talent out there, and I hope the Republican Party develops great talent at the local level too. I mean, governors, state representatives, um, senators, Congress people, because we do need, we need to get back to a more predictable, normal politics where, we fight over issues or we dispute issues, but it's not, it's not this intense focus on cultural issues that seem largely put on the table to divide, not to solve problems, not even really to express views, just to divide and make people angry. So I'm hoping we get those issues pressed aside. And let's not forget, the problems this country faces are astonishing. We have a public debt that's $31 trillion. I was a reporter back in DC 25 years ago. There was a serious talk about paying off the entire public debt. We were it was about $3 trillion. And there was a scenario that we paid off our entire public debt. We now have 31 trillion, and we are spending almost $1 trillion a year in interest. That's just throwing money away, $1 trillion a year. Let's get the budget. Excuse me. Let's get the budget in balance. Immigration. We haven't had a solid immigration law in 40 years. Used to be the bedrock of American success. Let's get an immigration policy. Healthcare. Income inequality, racial relations. So, I think that one of the tragedies of this current era, and I'll say this very directly, we've spent so much time and energy talking about Donald Trump and so little time and energy trying to solve the problems that threaten this country, that could threaten I think even survivable, but certainly the economic viability. So let's at least get back to solving the problems or addressing them, or at least trying to address them, rather than just debating Donald Trump. I just think we've allowed him to dominate our politics in a way that is not healthy. And it's done, I think, great damage to our country. And I'm hoping we get past it and move on to more productive pursuits, because it has not been uplifting. And I deal with people on an international realm, and they are beyond incredulous about how someone like Donald Trump could be a viable political figure. You know, impeached twice, a convicted felon, a clear and undisputed record of cheating on taxes, cheating on business partners, cheating on wives. I mean, just a record of just almost, just shockingly unacceptable human behavior. And yet here he is again for the third time, the nominee of the Republican Party, and has at least a 50-50 chance of becoming president again. I mean, how has this country gotten to that moment? And I know when I talk to people involved in international affairs, they don't understand it, and frankly, I have not given good explanations. I don't understand it. I do not understand. Let me make this point. Clearly, Donald Trump has an ear for an understanding of some of the uncertainty and struggles that middle class Americans are going through. Globalization has not helped everyone. It's, turned lives around, it's destroyed jobs, it's caused extraordinary dislocation. So we need solutions to that. But in my view, Trump has done a masterful job in sensing the anguish, stirring it, intensifying it, without even trying to offer solutions. He just he's just there to stir it up and to make it worse. And we need someone to start. We need people and parties to start solving problems again.